Hello everyone, welcome to this Chrome on Air webinar on boosting Chromebook adoption with effective change management. My name's Darren Ryden. I lead the Chrome customer success and partner engineering teams at Google in EMEA, and our role here is to help our customers maximize the value from Chrome. If you're listening live and you've got any questions, please submit them below and we'll answer them throughout the session. So I want you to think about the last time you asked a child to do something. How did you convince them to do what you wanted? Did you ask them why? How many times? Probably more than once, right? And we know that change is hard. When we ask someone to make a change, we're asking a lot from them. Very often with IT projects, we're asking people to make significant changes, and we don't always think through the implications of this. You can see this nice quote from Robert Cialdini. He conducted years of research on real-life situations of persuasion, and he concludes that people simply like to have reasons for what they do, and that we will be much more successful in influencing people if we can provide them with a reason why. Today, I want to talk about how we can help you guide your people through a migration to Chromebooks, help them understand their own reasons why. There'll be some what the benefits will be for them. We'll go through some of the theory behind this, and I will share you a set of resources that were recently released that will help save you time and effort and will help improve the chances of your projects delivering on its business objectives. So there are a number of ways that we can help you at Google with your Chromebook adoption journey. So the first one of these is sharing best practices, either industry best practices or from the experience we've developed through working with our existing customers. So this means kind of guidance on the technical deployment process and also change management principles that we know work for Chrome. We can also give you access to specialists and connect you to one another through participation in our customer community. We also have a collection of assets that we've created specifically to simplify the work you need to do when you're managing your work streams. And also, Google is also a customer when it comes to Chrome as well, right? So we've been through exactly the same challenges. So we can enable you to learn from our experiences here too. And then finally, we work with a number of partners on third-party solutions that will help you through different aspects of your migration projects. So I mentioned that change is hard, and therefore change management is important. I think it's good to step back and look at how a typical Chromebook deployment should be scoped. Ideally, if you can do this at the start of your project, that'd be perfect. So the majority of the effort will generally go into the technical setup and configuration. This is where you need to understand and execute the integration with the appropriate Google services, make sure you've got appropriate application environment in place. And this is probably going to be around 40% of the overall effort for the project. Most companies foresee a significant element of project management to go alongside this, which we would say is, in an ideal scenario, probably around 30%. But customers also very often forget about change management. Sometimes this comes as an afterthought, sometimes even sort of after a technical launch. So in an ideal world, we would say, ideally dedicate the same amount of effort towards change management and project management. So about 30% each. So those both totaling up to 60% with 40% of technical. So quite significant, right? So we talked before, and change is hard. And why is change hard, right? What does this mean? Change affects people, and it's all about people. People are at the core when it comes to change. And that's what any project that's influencing and driving change needs to think about. So you need to make sure that you are influencing, persuading, inspiring behavioral change in people that make them want to come along with your journey and buy into your project and the vision for it. So there are a number of change management methodologies that have been developed, but fundamentally they're all based around the same process that people go through when they experience change. So let's take a simple example that we can look at for a process of change. So for example, I'm a keen cyclist, and I would say that cycling is embedded in everything I do. But learning to ride a bike is pretty hard, right? And you need to be motivated when you first do this to make sure you go through that process of learning and that you stick to it. So for me, when I was young, my dad always cycled home from work and leaned his bike against the wall. I think I was 3 at the time, and I wanted to be able to do exactly the same. But I couldn't because my bike had stabilizers. So as crazy as it sounds, this was the single motivating factor for me to want to learn to ride my bike. So, this was the reason why I was excited, right? This was my motivation. And this is what was going to drive me when I wanted to go through and learn this new activity. And as I was doing that learning, that's kind of the enable phase. right? So this is where I'm learning the skills, I'm falling off, I'm trying again, I'm relying on that initial motivation of why I was excited to actually get me through that process. So eventually I was able to ride this bike and ride it on my own, right? So at this point I'm enabled. Funny story was actually that my parents thought that as I could now ride a bike, I needed a stand. So they put a stand on it, and then actually I wasn't able to lean against the wall anyway. So my initial motivation actually then changed, right? Because I couldn't lean in against the wall, but now I knew I could ride this bike. I wanted to go places and do things, go and visit my family. I wanted to go, further afield and visit friends, ride to school and that kind of stuff. And that then led me into the expand phase, where I'm utilizing that skill to do additional things. Again, I've got some excitement and motivation. In my case, it actually changed. It wasn't still the same motivation. And that's an important point. It doesn't always have to be the same motivation, but you still need to have some. And that got me through that expand phase. And then moving beyond that, does the new skill become embedded in everything you do, right? So for me, if I go to town, I would reach for a bike and I would cycle to town. If I'm going to exercise, I would go for a bike ride. Many of my friends are from cycling as well. So, you can see that the skill is truly stuck, right? It's become embedded in everything I do. And when you get to that embedded phase, you know that the new behaviors are really stuck, and they will literally, be embedded in everything you do, right? And change the way, in Chrome's case, the way you will work. So that's a kind of a simple example, right? So the 4 phases: excite, enable, get those skills, expand your capability, make the transition, fully make that transition to the change and be doing it more. And then the final step is to embed and make sure it's the way you work every day. So if you take that example of change, so that was a change that I opted into. So it was what we're calling a chosen change. Now, it's not always that we get the luxury of making a choice when, sometimes we have an imposed change upon us. So particularly in a sort of like environment where you may be taking new IT equipment, it could be an imposed change. So you need to think about those types of scenarios as well. So we're talking about 2 different types of scenarios here. So chosen change and imposed change. So if we take another example story, right, of an imposed change. So if you take me right now, I'm sat at home, like I'm sure many others. This was a change, working from home, that was imposed upon me very quickly at short notice. I must admit I wasn't particularly excited about it at the time, but I was able to do this. I had my Chromebook, so I was able to work at home straight away, which was great. We were very lucky at Google, because Google did a great job of thinking about how we needed to be enabled, right? How could we be productive at home? So we had a little process put in place so we could get monitors and mouse and keyboards and stuff, so that we could make sure that we had the basics to enable us to be productive when we were at home. And also in parallel to that, they did a really good job of the communication around why we were doing it, what was happening with the offices, and when we would be able to go back or when we wouldn't be able to go back. So all of a sudden, the why was being communicated really well to me. So admittedly, I may not have been excited, but I was really bought into the reasons why. So all of a sudden, I'm kind of, coming along with that change and fully bought into actually making this work. But moving beyond enable and thinking about expanding a capability. So today I'm sat at home and I'm recording this webinar, and we have lights and webcams and microphones. So, we're expanding the way we are working at home, with additional tools, and making it much more capable, more things that I'm able to do in this way of working. So I'm truly in the expand phase right now. Moving forward, it's quite likely that a lot of the things we're doing now, we're realizing are good ways of working, and they're likely to become embedded, forever as well. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how that goes. But key points, if I move on to the next slide, is that the process is exactly the same, but you may start in a different way, and you may have to put different amounts of effort through some of these phases. So in the first example there with the chosen change, it's really important to make sure that there's a lot of effort put in up front in that excitement phase to make sure people understand the reasons why they want to buy into that change. Because if they don't buy in, then the rest of the process doesn't happen. So this is critical. In the second scenario, where we're talking about an imposed change, you kind of potentially could come straight into this process at the enable phase. You could come to work one day and find you've got a new computing device, right? You could find that you can't go into the office and you've got to work from home. So you've potentially skipped that excitement phase. In an ideal world, you would still put that excitement phase in place and make sure you're managing communications up front, setting expectations and explaining to people, why this change is happening. But it's not always the case. If that's not possible, then it's important to make sure you continue the messaging around the reasons, the why, and try to get people excited and to buy into the change so that they can continue through that process. It's only when people really understand that they'll commit and that your change will be much more successful. So what we've done at Google is we've built an adoption and change management framework that's based on that process of change for an individual, but we've modified it so that it can be applied at an organization or at an organizational level or for large groups of people. So we've got the same 4 phases. So excite, instead of it just being about personal excitement, it's about how do you drive that excitement and the awareness across the organization, right? So you've got to think about things like engaging stakeholders, building sponsorship, creating a clear vision of the reason for your project and why you're doing it. The enable phase, again, is kind of giving everybody what they need to make sure they can be successful on day one, right? If you're giving them Chromebooks, how do they make these Chromebooks work? How do they log in? What training do they need to be able to be productive on day one? Then expand is where we're talking about driving further use across the organization. So this means more people, more groups of people, you're growing the adoption, and the people that are already using the devices, how they're actually going to use them for more, how they're going to conduct more activities with them. And then also embed is when things start to become the normal. So this is when you can start measuring the progress as well. So people are utilizing Chrome all the time. You can start looking at the success stories. You can start promoting those, start sort of self-help, and start understanding, measuring where you are and what you're going to do next. So quick summary here of some of the key points that you need to think about for your change plan, right? Absolutely critical. You've really got to understand the reason why. And this isn't why for the organization. This is why for each individual. And that needs to be kind of targeted communications, right, for personal commitment. So you've got to think about the different types of people within your organization, why they're going to be using Chromebooks, what the motivation is going to be for them, and what's the reason for them to want to buy in it, what's in it for them, right? This will then enable you to get that personal commitment. So, through targeted communications upfront and through training as well, you make sure you've got the right message, people buy in, and then also back this up with continuous training as well, even once people have got their tools in their hands, to make sure they can continue to be more productive. And then moving on, start to define your actual adoption strategy, right? So think about, what is the switching process, right? Are people going to be choosing devices themselves, right? Or are they going to be needed to be convinced, or is this something you're going to sort of force upon them? Is it an imposed change? Think about how you're going to target your employees, and what's the segmentation going to be, right? How are you going to think about the people that are right for Chrome, and the way you're going to think about who moves to Chrome when. There are a number of ways of looking at this, and the traditional approaches of segmentation may have been by thinking about from an organizational structure, right? But there are other ways as well that could be sort of data-based, and thinking about the way people work rather than what they do. So for example, you could have 2 people in, say, an accounts department working with numbers. One may be using spreadsheets to do their data analysis, and the other one may be writing sort of scripts to do the same sort of thing. They may have different needs, and they may be more or less suitable for Chrome, and they may need a different migration path. So you could think about the way people work and how they work and where they work, as well as just their role. So the more modern way of thinking about sort of employee segmentation. Also, how are you going to get employee commitment, right? So think about the information they need, and the kind of communication that needs to happen for them to actually turn around and make that commitment and understand what they're committing to. And then think about the end-to-end communication, step-by-step plan on how you're going to communicate with employees, and think about this in advance and make sure you're catering for all their needs at that personal level as well. Also, at this stage, it's also worth thinking about how you're going to measure success as well. So I've talked quite a lot about the theory now, but what I want to do is show you what we've actually been working on at Google to actually help you with your journey as well. So this is the new Chromebook Employee Adoption Kit, right? So this is something we've been working on that's released now. And this has a number of things in it that helps get you started. So we've got things like guidance on defining an adoption strategy, which is more detail on what we've talked about today already. A number of assets that help you drive awareness, and we'll go into those a little bit deeper in a minute. Additional onboarding resources that support people once they actually get their devices. And a couple of tools like the Chromebook simulator and guidance on establishing a champions network that will help you drive awareness and support your users as they go through their change processes. And some additional things like survey templates and tips on how to manage success as well. Measure success. So looking at the excite phase, so this is where we're talking about generating awareness, right? So some of the things we've created here, a number of assets that can be used either digitally or physically sort of printed as posters or flyers, but these will help you drive awareness. They're all branded with the Google Chrome branding. So this means that users that see all of this messaging, it will also resonate with other things they've seen in the press that have been pushed out there by Google on the standard messaging as well. So everything aligns with the standard marketing messages. There are things that you can use as sort of like banners, landing pages for your intranet, templates for emails. And then when you think about, sort of like day one, when your users have got devices and you want to get them moving as soon as possible, we've got a number of assets here that will actually help them. So the Getting Started guide is something that you can just either print off and give them, that they can kind of understand how they can get up and running with their new device as soon as possible. You could either print this off, or you could install it onto the device, so you could have it as an icon on the launch bar, so you can just go through and sort of click to bring it up. We've got a Chromebook simulator, which is a really nice way for people that are kind of know roughly what they want to do, but not quite sure how to do it. They can kind of find nice, simple ways of kind of like navigating to keyboard shortcuts, for example, or finding out how to change the background, take a screenshot, things like that. So there's a nice interactive way where it shows you through simple animations how to perform certain tasks. And then we've also got, for the enable phase, the tips and tricks guide as well. So this is something where we've got a large library of specific tricks and tips that you can give to your users. Ideally, we suggest you would do this sort of like on a proactive basis. Once they've got started with their Chromebooks, you can actually start educating them, and this keeps reminding them of new additional functionality, extra things that they can learn as well. So it keeps the learning going and helps them kind of go through from that enable phase through to the embed phase. Through to the expand phase, right through to the embed phase. So tips and tricks typically can start from enable, they can go through expand, and they can just continue until things become embedded. So also from an expand perspective, this is where we see creating networks of Chrome champions, so people that are keen to adopt Chrome and keen to spread the word and support people, makes a big difference, right? So once people are starting to use their devices, if they've got people that are physically locally that can help the community, then it's a really good way of it continues to drive the excitement and the awareness, but it's also people that you can utilize as kind of an extended support group to have additional knowledge and support people through that process. So we've also got a number of templates here that help you manage that. So it just helps set expectations that can be used as email templates to help manage that network of champions as well. And then when it comes to the embed phase, it's kind of time to start thinking about feedback and optimization as well. So it's a good time to look at sort of surveys of employees, look at your KPIs as well that you've been measuring, start talking about the successes you've had and thinking about what you're going to do next. So we've got a few templates here that help you do that too. So I mentioned at the start there was sort of three things that we can do to help. So far we've only talked about the first one, so let's move on to the others as well, right? So the second one is lessons from Google. So we're a customer as well, like I said, and we've been through exactly the same process. We have new employees joining. We have many people that don't have awareness of Chrome. So we have been through exactly the same process, and we've learned the hard way on some of this as well. What we can suggest is things that we've learned as well. So definitely think about things like providing Chromebooks to new starters by default, right? So if you give people an option, one of the don'ts here is don't just put Chromebooks on the catalog, right, without education. If you give people an option to choose and they're not fully aware and educated and excited about something like Chrome, then they'll probably just opt for what they know today. So if you just put them on the catalog, it's not necessarily going to work. So you need to either default them to Chrome when they're new, or make sure you've got that awareness going as well. Another thing we learned as well is incentivize users to upgrade their devices. So what we actually did was we have a refresh program like most companies do, but we gave users the option to take an out-of-band refresh or update to Chrome if they wished, which meant they could get a sort of new device without having to wait for their sort of 2 or 3 year refresh date. So that was a good way to incentivize them. Along with that, we did also give them the option to opt back as well, right? So people are taking a chance. They are deciding to go through this change process. If they're willing to kind of inflict this change upon themselves, then we give them the confidence that if it doesn't work for them, that they could back out and go back to their old device as well. Also, we've got a good solution with grab and go. So we've got for every site, we've got racks of Chromebooks where people can use these devices as either a short-term loan to get familiar with Chrome, or as a replacement temporarily if they've forgotten their sort of their own device or they've got a problem with it. So this is a good way for people to kind of give Chrome a go, to become familiar with it, or just to use it in emergency situations as well. And we find that's a really good way of getting Chrome out there. We also have a number of customers who actually use this as a rollout method where people can come and get a Chromebook, and then if they like it, they just don't take it back. And then the other one, make sure that you provide lots of education and resources. So we've got lots of internal resources so that our employees can learn about Chrome as well. So that again, that's all back to the why. And then on the don'ts, we talked about not putting Chrome just on a catalog, and don't forget that it's going to be a perceived risk for users to agree to switch. So the do nothing approach is always going to be easier. So you need to think about that and make sure you remember to support them through that process, because deciding to put yourself through change is a big commitment and decision for people. And then, so there's a couple of resources here from Next from last year. So if you want to find out a little bit more about our internal journey and how we managed to scale Chrome within Google, there's a great presentation here. And there's also another one from some of our top customers, and a bit of detail where they've gone through their own Chrome adoption journeys as well. These will all be available from the link that I'll share with you in a second. So the other area we talked about at the beginning was with additional third-party tools. So we work with a number of third parties to support what we do. There are a number of tools, including Lakeside and Softwatch, which enable you to have a data-based approach to understand your user base and understand whether they're ready for Chrome and what they actually use on their existing computers. And also, another really useful resource is this white paper from Forrester, and this goes into a little bit about a lot deeper what I was talking earlier about different ways of segmenting users. So this talks about a more modern approach to user segmentation, where you can think about the way people work and how they work, as well as what they do. And then finally, I'd also recommend taking a look at this great white paper on change management best practices. This is something we've created through partnership with Deloitte quite recently. It gives another perspective on workforce adoption journeys with Chrome Enterprise. So as we close off the session, I just want to come back to the links, okay? So this is where the first link on the left here is where you can go to get access to all of the stuff we've talked about today. But also, if you want to talk to our sales team, there's another link here that you can go through to get a contact and a call back there as well. And that's it from me. All I'd like to say is thank you very much for joining today. There are more sessions coming up as well. So the next one is on July the 22nd, Modernizing the Delivery of Healthcare with Chrome Enterprise. Thanks very much for your time, and hope you enjoyed the session.